Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So for today, what we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and go through and give a sort of rundown on diet culture, what fat acceptance activists consider diet culture, and then I do want to give a bit of a rundown on what I believe is good or bad about diet culture. So let's go ahead and get started here. This is coming from this one site called Within, which is a little cringe as a site. It seems like a very fat activist-y site. So we're just going to go ahead and go through it. I'm going to try to go easy on my technology. It can be a little weird. A little sketchy, so I'm trying to do this in a different way this time. I also just want to say, I cannot believe that your fat friend is the same person from the maintenance phase. Thank you guys so much for telling me. That's crazy. Anyways, let's continue. What is diet culture? You've probably heard the term diet culture if you've spent any time immersed in the world of fitness and health. Diet culture is extremely insidious and pervasive throughout society, and it can have extremely negative effects on many people's health and well-being. I'm going to move up a bit. Keep reading to learn about the meaning of diet culture and why it persists. Diet culture meaning. Before diving into the problems associated with diet culture, it's helpful to have an understanding of the meaning of this term. Researchers have described diet culture as a moral hierarchy of bodies fueled by health myths. Okay, so I already disagree. I don't see it as this at all. This sounds very, very, very fat activist-y right off the bat. So what is diet culture, in my opinion, or what we would colloquially consider it? Diet culture is the idea that we should monitor our diets, that we should consider what we're eating, that we should really focus on what we're putting into our mouths. And diet culture also has to do with the fact that what you eat has an effect on your weight, and that there is an element of either reason or logic in controlling your diet at all. That's how I would define it. So a moral hierarchy of bodies fueled by health myths is a bit cringy to start with. Now, I do want to say there are some things about diet culture that I don't like and some things that I do, but that's the definition that they're going with versus what I go with. Diet culture is in part perpetuated by widespread discussions of dieting in the media, especially in online forums, social media, and popular books. Dieting for weight loss has become a common culture practice, which is reinforced through norms surrounding food and body ideals. So as you can see, they're going for an extremely I don't know how else to say this, but they're going for a very social construct-y view of it, which is fine. I mean, yes, technically it is a social construct, but I do think that there are some bases in reality when it comes to this. For example, it is very obvious that your diet can affect your body's size. That's very clear. They probably view that as a social construct, which is odd, but let's go ahead and continue. Diet culture also goes beyond specific diets and extends to the way that food, exercise, bodies, and health are culturally viewed, discussed, and valued. It has a variety of negative physical, mental, and social health effects. But are there any benefits? That's the question. And also, what is the alternative? That's another question. Diet culture encourages dieting behaviors which are associated with long-term health consequences like loss of muscle from repeated weight loss attempts, weakened bones, high blood pressure, and chronic inflammation. So we are really getting into a lot of the fat activist talking points here. I want us to ask ourselves critically, why do they want to only portray the negative views of quote unquote dieting? And why do they always ignore the benefits of certain things, like losing weight when you are extremely obese, for example? It can be very, very helpful for you, but they don't talk about that. Diet culture encourages diet. I already read that. So the issue is hormone issues can cause weakened bones. Hormone issues can cause high blood pressure. Chronic inflammation can be the cause and result of hormone problems, as well as loss of muscle, particularly in the case of having high amounts of adrenaline. If you are running on adrenaline and not thyroid hormone, then you will lose muscle. This can happen on a diet or off a diet. They don't talk about it this way, do they? They view the diet as the only thing that causes these issues. But we all know that eating really, really terribly, which we define eating terribly on this channel as eating a huge amount of seed oils in particular, but that does cause thyroid hormone to go down through various means, which causes adrenaline to go up, which will cause the same loss of muscle, even if you are not dieting. If you eat a diet full of McDonald's French fries, you will have the same result of these diet things. You will have a loss of muscle, you will have weakened bones, you will have high blood pressure, and you will have chronic inflammation. So is it really the dieting itself, or is it a hormonal problem? I would argue it's a hormonal problem that can sometimes be exacerbated by dieting, but is also exacerbated by doing nothing and by making zero change. That to me makes a lot more sense and definitely does coincide much more with reality. Factors surrounding diet culture. Diet culture can encourage dieting behaviors, but there is more to this phenomenon than specific diets. A recent study found that experts and advocates in the areas of feminism and healthcare perceive diet culture to be linked to the following: myths surrounding what it means to be healthy, specifically that thinness equates to health, the tendency to categorize foods as good and bad, the belief that women should aspire to be thin. People of other genders often also experience this. Demonizing larger bodies, assumptions that having a higher weight body is a result of poor eating choices and a lack of exercise, structural inequalities which lead women to believe they must fit a certain body ideal in order to be attractive to men. People of other genders also often experience pressure to conform to specific body ideas to be attractive. So let's go ahead and go through all these, okay? Within diet culture, I do agree there can be myths surrounding what it means to be healthy. So there are a lot of things within diet culture that are actually wrong. So one of the best examples I have is the idea that my mom has a fatty liver, or she has, a really, really bad liver. Like, she's getting cirrhotic, but she's not quite there, but there's a lot of issues with her liver. When she went to the doctor told her that she should have no carbs, no sugar, no saturated fat, and basically to just eat only protein. And I remember my mom came home from the doctor and she told me that. And I told her that her doctor was crazy, because it is absolutely impossible to sustain a diet that is just protein. That's insane. Especially for somebody who's morbidly obese, super morbidly obese, already hypothyroid, already having all these issues. It's a terrible thing for a doctor to say. Absolutely abysmal. Horrible, 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 horrible advice that is going to go in the ear of a person and go right out the other. Period. And why do doctors say this stuff? Because they read something a couple times and they just run with it. But then they say, oh, well, it's your fault because you didn't adhere to it. That's BS. So yes, there are myths within diet culture around what it means to be healthy. Primarily, saturated fat being bad for you and polyunsaturated fat being good for you. That is probably the biggest myth in regards to healthful eating, quote unquote. Now, when I say this, I need you to understand that it is not all or nothing. It's not black and white. I'm not saying nobody should ever eat any polyunsaturated fatty acids. That is not possible. There are polyunsaturated fatty acids and saturated fatty acids in basically everything. Most things are a mixture of things, but the idea that we should have much more polyunsaturated fatty acids rather than saturated fatty acids is a myth. It should be swapped. You should be eating much more saturated than polyunsaturated. So that is a diet culture myth. So yes, there can be myths. 2, the tendency to categorize foods as good and bad. This is not right. There are such a thing as bad foods. Foods that will cause inflammation, that will cause problems in virtually every single person, depending on how severe their health already is. But even in a healthful place, if you eat McDonald's French fries fried in hydrogenated soybean oil, you will experience inflammation and issues. Now, most people do this type of thing when they are very fat. They do it all the time, which means that those fatty acids increase inflammation over time, and they end up being stored within your fat cells, which then have to be released and dealt with when you are losing the weight, which also explains many of the symptoms people feel when they try to lose weight. The fat itself is kind of poisonous because of what you ate. So you have to deal with the food that you ate as a morbidly and super morbidly obese person. 3, the belief that women should aspire to be thin. People of other genders often also experience this. So, to go in line, this is also a relatively good thing. When it comes to the body fat on your body being made of polyunsaturated fatty acids, that means if you go into a slight fast or you burn more energy than you currently have, your body will depend on that fat. When that happens, it releases these fatty acids, and if the ratios are terribly off, like they usually are for people in today's society, then you will feel horrible. You will also have a lot of hypothyroid symptoms. Not every single person in the world, but most people. And you will also experience hormonal fluctuations, particularly higher estrogen. Again, not everybody, but most people. And that leads to a whole host of issues that I have experienced that we get to. And it's just a nightmare, honestly. And if you're very, very fat, these effects are felt very, very badly. That is why you should aspire to be thin eventually, because you need to take off that fat that is counteracting your hormone system and your thyroid system, which will lead to all of these other health issues that we talked about earlier. Loss of muscle, weakened bones, high blood pressure, and chronic inflammation. So if you are this super morbidly obese person, you will experience these things regardless. That's what they don't tell you. So yes, you should want to be thin. Absolutely. Okay. Demonizing larger bodies. So this is a bit much as far as a moralizing term. I do think that there can be issues where people will hate on people for being fat, or they have a lot of hang-ups or issues. I do think that can be really negative. I think that it's not helpful to tell somebody they look ugly, for example. I think that's really harsh and just kind of nasty for no reason. I don't think that there's any reason to be demonizing fat people. I think if you're doing that, you don't really want to help. I think a lot of people that do that sort of thing, they actually do support a body hierarchy, and you give these fat activists material to work with. So you're not actually helping to solve the issue. Assumptions that having a higher weight body is a result of poor eating choices and lack of exercise. That is just reality. Honestly, I think there are going to be some cases that are pretty rare, but usually, even if you have something like PCOS or hypothyroidism, or an ED or anything else, there is going to be an issue where you're usually eating too much. And in today's society, that too much food that you're eating is likely full of these horrible oils, and you are probably eating very poor. You are probably eating pastries, McDonald's. You're having pasta with store-made pasta sauce that has these oils in it. You're having fried foods at, Panda Express. You're having salad dressings that are conventionally made. You're having chips, especially. You're having so many different foods, especially when you're overeating. You get so much more of these oils in your system, and they do make you fat, and that is a result of what you're actually eating. Now, remember, these hormonal issues can cause you to eat more anyways, but you still would want to eat better because it would have less of an effect on you. So you'd want to eat things that don't have those oils in them. Lastly, structurally inequalities, which lead women to believe they must fit a certain body ideal in order to be attractive to men. People of other genders also often experience pressure to conform to specific body ideas to be attractive. So we know this is in large part biological. When it comes to size, there is some give and take there, but it's not completely there, and it's only within a certain range. If a woman is 350 pounds or larger, she's going to struggle in some regard with men not being attractive to her. Health is attractive to people, and it can go both ways. If you're overly thin, you will be less attractive. If you're overly fat, you will be less attractive. People are naturally drawn and attracted to somebody that at least appears to be healthy. So that's really extra. Let's go ahead and continue. At its essence, diet culture promotes restriction, obsession around food and exercise, and avoiding and stigmatizing fatness, and anxiety about the social, physical, and romantic consequences of failing to perform these behaviors. Okay. I'm just really looking at that. There's some truth to that. The harmful effects of diet culture. The term diet can be used in different ways, and in some cases a specific diet, such as gluten-free for someone with celiac, or a low-protein diet for someone with, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. They always put this stuff in here to make me feel dumb. No, I'm just kidding. Is appropriate to manage personal health needs. However, dieting with the goal of intentional weight loss has been shown by decades of research to be both ineffective and harmful. So, one of the biggest issues with this statement right here is that they act as if there's only one way to try to intentionally lose weight. They act as if any attempt is done, it's all the same. That's false. That is absolutely false. In fact, numerous studies have shown that dieting behavior is associated with weight cycling, in which people lose weight only to regain it thereafter, in a pattern that is often called yo-yo dieting. Over time, weight cycling has been found to lead to negative health outcomes, such as higher insulin and blood sugar levels, as well as increases in cholesterol and blood pressure. Ultimately, if people diet in an attempt to improve their health, they may end up doing just the opposite. So, let's look at these side effects once again. All these things get worse within obesity as well. Higher insulin gets worse within obesity. Blood sugar levels rise. within morbid and supermorbid obesity with time. Your cholesterol increases and your blood pressure increases within obesity. So ultimately, they are telling you that you have a choice between these things happening slower or quote unquote faster, even if they usually aren't actually getting worse. You are getting worse in general. The fatter you are, for the longer you are. So really, once again, the cause has to do with hormonal issues. Hormonal issues usually involving hypothyroidism that result from both obesity and toxic dieting, or dieting that omits entire food groups, dieting that is crash dieting, that is, really, really greatly reducing the calories way too far, dieting that promotes avoiding nutrients like sugar, glucose, saturated fats, fruit, right? These types of diets that do encourage you to avoid entire macronutrients or entire food groups like animal products, for example. These all have disastrous effects on your hormone health, and you will feel it, particularly if you are super morbidly obese. You will feel it so badly, so fast. And if you force yourself to stay on it in that state, you absolutely will have all these things getting worse, which is why they say weight cycling causes these issues. But it's not so much the weight cycling or your weight at all. It has to do with the hormones that can be a result of the weight, of the fatty acids being released, and you getting rid of those fatty acids, putting them back on by eating all these seed oils again, then getting rid of them again, then putting them back on over and over again ad nauseum. It is very bad for you. It's the actual exposure to these fatty acids that is the problem. So, not the actual losing of the weight. And if you do keep your hormones in check, or at least in mind, then you can counteract the effects of these things, even within losing weight, or make it bearable so you only have to do it once, which is my entire goal of this channel and why I talk to you guys. Ultimately, if people diet in an attempt to improve their health, they may end up doing just the opposite. Yes, but if they do nothing, then it will tend to get worse as well. Dieting behaviors often occur in response to the pressures of diet culture. Studies have shown that women who internalize diet culture's thin ideals show more body-related anxiety when viewing pictures of thin models than compared to models who are not thin. Finally, one study from the UK found 46% of girls and 27% of boys in teen and preteen age groups made attempts to look like people they had seen in the media. What this all means is that people, including children, are receiving diet culture's messages that thinner bodies are more valuable and attempting dangerous and ineffective behaviors in response to this. Diet culture's messaging has been found to increase the risk of ED, depression, and anxiety. In teenage girls, the body dysfunction that arises from diet culture norms has been linked to the use of eating D behaviors to attempt to manipulate weight. So, that's all they're saying. They're just saying it's bad and you shouldn't do it because it's going to make teens feel bad. So what I would say in regards to this is, honestly, even if the media wasn't there, somebody who is overweight, especially when young, they're going to be feeling effects from that, mostly on a social level, regardless. It doesn't matter if the media is there or not. People will still see a difference. There have been many studies, actually, that do show that children avoid fat children as friends. They tend to not want to be friends with somebody who's fat. Children have not had a long time of being exposed to these kind of things. They would say, oh, blah, 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 blah. But the fact is, children are not concerned with being attractive or not. So there is something somewhat natural in regards to this avoidance, that children do see that. It's not necessarily a good thing. It's sad, actually, but when it comes to something like weight, you can change it, and you should. Which I have thoughts on how to do that with children, but anyways, so we are done with that. So, what is the things that diet culture got right? What is the things that it got wrong? First and foremost, diet culture is correct in the fact that you should control your diet. You should have a level of healthy restriction. So you should not go out into the world and eat as much of whatever you want all the time. That is not going to be a recipe for success. However, control can also account for the other way. You also cannot eat nothing. Okay, so you should be eating a balanced diet or a calorically appropriate diet for you. So that part is correct. We should be considering how much we are eating. That is absolutely true of diet culture. The other thing that is true of diet culture is there is such a thing as bad foods. A lot of people try to say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just the amount. It doesn't matter at all what else you eat. On this channel, and what I argue for is the fatty acids in seed oils, the profile, the ratio of polyunsaturated to saturated is so terrible and so inflammatory that nobody should be eating those oils pretty much ever. If you could avoid it forever, you'd be better off. There's really no benefit to eating them. It is completely unnatural. Things like rice bran oil, completely not ever in nature in any way, shape, or form. Our bodies are not equipped to deal with this. And we have been doing this for decades. We've been eating these oils for about 100 years, and you've seen people having health issues and getting kind of worse and worse, medicine having to keep up with people dying of more and more diseases. And it's getting so bad now where obesity is now skyrocketing. We need to consider this. Our seed oil consumption has skyrocketed over the decades, and things are getting worse the more we eat them. So I argue for that all the time. So yes, there absolutely are bad foods. The other thing that I think diet culture got right is really the fact that what we eat has an effect on our size. That is true. They try to argue against this. It's not living in reality. It is a joke. It's something I almost cannot even entertain. So what did diet culture get wrong? The things that diet culture got wrong is an overemphasis on appearance. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look as good as you can, but that should not be the only reason or the primary reason for your diet. Now, a lot of people say it shouldn't matter because what ends up being for the best ends up being for the best. What I say to that is if you do go for appearance only, then it often will lead you to do things that are unhealthy. And whenever you're more unhealthy, then ultimately you don't look as good. I think we know some people that have lost a lot of weight in unhealthy ways and they don't look as good. They can look aged, wrinkly, like they have more problems after weight loss. It's not good. So even if you're trying to look as best as you can, really the best way is to be as healthy as possible. Another thing that diet culture got wrong is black and white thinking. So although I do say, and I will always say, that seed oils are a bad food, quote unquote, if you can even call them a food, that doesn't mean that it is completely black and white, that any polyunsaturated fatty acids are bad, that we should avoid them completely. That's not real. The truth is really that diet culture, although it is black and white, it should be gray. There should be balance. You should be able to see something with nuance. Maybe a seed oil is very unhealthy, something like peanut oil, but maybe if you are relatively healthy or your body could personally handle it, a peanut is not the worst thing in the world for you to eat. True what we should aim for within diet culture is nuance, context, and gray areas. Also ratios. So always remember, it's not about never having anything that is a treat in your entire life. It's about making treats without these oils. It's about keeping your calories in mind, staying reasonable, and it's about not thinking of it in black and white. If you go to a restaurant and it has seed oil in it, you don't have to throw your whole diet out because it's not all ruined. You still have such a higher ratio of saturated fat if you were doing the protocol that I talk about. That's not to say to just have it every day or anything like that, but it's not the same as keto or vegan, where those diets are so black and white, and I think they were so normalized, and they are bad. I remember when I was keto, I would just really fear eating carbohydrate, and if I did, it would kick me out of ketosis, and it was horrible if I ever miscalculated my macros or had a problem. And we all know how it is with veganism. It's the same way. If you have a little bit of an animal product, you have to cry about it, you feel sick to your stomach, you turn to this crazy person because you violated a black and white eating pattern. It's not healthy to view dieting this way. Dieting is not something that you should be able to judge somebody else upon because you don't know where they're personally at in their journey. So what I can use as an example is really me, I guess. I don't want to put anybody else on blast. But when I was first healing my thyroid, I really, really, really depended on sugar. I depended on a super high amount of sugar because my energy levels were so low and my metabolism was so broken that I could not function with just a little bit of carb. I had really damaged my system doing keto. So when I first started doing this protocol, I had to eat, which I was very poor at the time as well. So I had to eat really green tea. I went to Walmart and I get green tea, a pack of cheese, Sour Patch Kids, bananas, and usually some kind of meat or eggs. That would be like my breakfast. And then at dinner, I would have like meat or something. I always made sure I had some kind of meat that day. But as you can see, that's not exactly a diet culture meal, but it was what I needed at the time. Now, after 6 months of eating that way, I experienced less insulin resistance from avoiding these polyunsaturated fatty acids in seed oils and eating much more saturated fat in the form of cheeses and meats. I'd have hamburger patties, I would have bacon, I would have it, bacon fried potatoes. Like I really upped my saturated fat. I had lots of coconut. I would make coconut with marshmallows in the microwave. This is the stuff I was eating. I was so depleted that this is what I needed to eat at the time. And I got hella hate for it when I was doing this online and stuff. But after 6 months of doing that, my insulin resistance went down, my night blindness went away, and my appetite drastically decreased. And I started craving different things. I started wanting yogurts, sweetened yogurts, and orange juice, and different types of highly carb foods, but they had different profiles and they were a bit healthier. Now, that continued for a while, and, my hormones and stuff would fluctuate with the seasons, but over the years, I started shifting over time, and I would still eat candy relatively often in the winter, in the winter of 22. So in January, February, March of 2022, I really depended on rice. I needed to eat more of that glucose, that grain during the winter because it's tough. And I just sort of phased through. And by August of 2022, I started counting calories because I had healed enough where I could handle that. So then I lost some weight over the rest of the summer and the fall, and I went into winter. My hormone profile changed from being at a lower weight and a lower set point, and that led to this year, where now, really this summer and this spring, I am not really eating any candy. I'm not tolerating juice very well. I have to have more fat and more protein and less carb. So within diet culture, I went through a few different diets. I went through very high carb. I went through high carb, high fat. I've gone through high carb, low fat as I went through that really in, sorry, my leg is falling asleep. I went through that really in the fall of 2022. I really was eating high carb and lower fat when I was counting at first, and then now I'm going a bit lower carb and higher fat. And the thing that diet culture doesn't get right is that there is a balance between all of these philosophies. Like, we must look at our diet intuitively. We must feel how our bodies feel and eat what they are craving. There are times, like in winter of 2021, or late 2021 going into early 2022, where I didn't have very much meat, and then times where I craved a lot of meat. We have to have flexibility within a weight loss journey. We have to have flexibility in caring for our bodies. When it comes to macros, you have to focus on how you feel and what you need. Especially within a calorie deficit, you have to make choices. So what diet culture gets wrong is the idea that we have a one-size-fits-all diet for every person at every moment, at every time, at every level of health. That is not true. When I was that severe, I had to have hyperpalatable foods. I am healthier now. Now I don't have to. But when you tell somebody that is very severe that they must eat non-palatable foods in that typical lower carb, higher protein, higher fat diet that I am currently eating, you cut them off from that bridge, from getting from one place to the other. That's what's important, is like, I think people, they tend to say, oh, well, you just have more discipline now, or oh, you're just doing better. No, I healed my thyroid by avoiding these oils and taking certain steps to improve thyroid health. And over time, it improved to the point where I can have this type of diet. So it's a tricky thing. We all want to be able to look at somebody and judge what they're eating, but you can't really do that unless that they're eating fast food, because you don't know where somebody's at. You don't know what somebody's capable of. And I guarantee you that a lot of these FAs, they are at a very severe state and they need to have a lot of sugar and just avoid those fats. But they don't do that because I don't want to have to control anything at all. I don't want to have to think about anything at all. Diet culture sucks. This is bad, blah, 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 blah. So I struggle with both sides of the issue. I think the middle is the right path. There are going to be things that you have to compromise on in order to make it, especially coming from a very, very high place of super morbid obesity. And it's a long journey, and it's a journey of many different seasons. But if you just see it through that sort of paradigm, it would help. And that's where I feel like a lot of people struggle, because in today's world, diet culture is very black and white. It is one size fits all. And I say that is the biggest thing that diet culture got wrong. And I hope I'm clear. I'm trying. If you guys have questions, please let me know. I really would love to explain this further. But remember, ratios, gray areas, individualized approaches, and context. Context within your current health level at your current place and standing.